Chapter 31:20. On this day, Lin Chengjin and Pei Zixuan used the opportunity of hunting to pull Mu Ling to the side. Do you know his identity? Hearing this, Mu Ling's eyes flashed and instinctively shook his head. I don't know. You don't know? That's impossible. We saw a huge change in your attitude along the way. Pei Zixuan said, obviously not believing his words. Hearing this, Mu Ling sighed. Don't ask anymore. Even if I know, I can't say. If I could, I would have said it long ago. He sighed helplessly and said to the two, Let's go back quickly. The three of us have come out. They must be anxious from waiting. As he spoke, he did not wait for them to speak and quickly walked back. Seeing this, Pei Zixuan and Lin Chengjin looked at each other. Looks like he really knows. Furthermore, Mu Jiu's identity is probably not ordinary. Ever since the restriction here loosened, we have not met a single beast along the way. Even if we met one, those beasts did not come close and quickly left as if they were afraid of something. The two of them chatted for a while before heading back. When they came to the resting area, they saw Mu Jiu leaning against a tree to rest, while the two little beasts were squatting on the left and right sides of the tree branches. Mu Ling and the rest were preparing to roast meat. As time passed, the aroma of the meat filled the air. At this moment, a group of people walked out from the front. Seeing the group of 30 to 40 people quietly surrounding them, Mu Ling and the rest stood up cautiously. I was wondering where the aroma of the meat came from. So it's the people from Blue Star Immortal Sect roasting meat here. Looks like they knew that we were coming and prepared this meat for us. A man from the other party crossed his arms and hugged his sword as he stared at them. His gaze swept across them and sized up Mu Ling and the rest. Are you going to leave the things behind? Or do you need us to do it ourselves? The other party looked at Mu Ling and the rest mockingly. When his gaze swept past Gretchen's face, he revealed an inexplicable smile. Junior Sister Guan, long time no see. Hearing this, Lin Yusher asked softly, Senior Sister Guan, you know him? Gretchen looked at that person and her expression changed slightly. She lightly bit her lips and did not speak, but her hands in her sleeves were tightly clenched into fists. When the others saw that Gretchen's expression wasn't very good, they couldn't help but feel astonished. Did Gretchen really know this person? But what was their relationship? Why was the way the two of them looked at each other so strangely? Of course I know her. I'm her fiancé. As the man spoke, he looked at Gretchen with an evil smile on his face. I think the Guan clan has already informed you, right? Since we've met here, shouldn't we take the opportunity to cultivate our relationship? I didn't agree to this marriage. You have nothing to do with me. Gretchen said coldly. Under her sleeves, her fists were tightly clenched. She was trying her best to control her emotions. When the disciples behind him heard this, they all laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, Senior Brother Wang. Is this really your fiancé? Why is she talking to you like that? Is she looking down on you? Senior Martial Brother Wang, you're not following your husband's orders. What do you mean by lacking in moral integrity? Didn't you hear what that junior sister said? She has nothing to do with Senior Brother Wang. The disciples behind her mocked as they looked at Gretchen. Chapter 31:21. Impolite? Ha! How impolite! How can you be impolite to us? A man raised his eyebrows and smiled evilly. Senior brothers and junior brothers, listen to them. They actually said that they would be impolite to us? They really don't take us seriously. Do you think we should teach them a lesson? Do you think we're sick cats if we don't show our might? A man stood out and sneered at Mu Ling and the others. You're disciples of the four sects after all. How about this? Don't say that we're bullying you because we outnumber you. Let's have a one-on-one battle. The loser has to hand over everything he has. How about that? Mu Ling and the others' eyes flashed. They thought it would be a group battle. They didn't expect this person to propose such an idea. The outcome of a one-on-one battle was uncertain. However, they couldn't guarantee that these people would be angry after losing. Thus, Mu Ling, Pei Zixuan, and Lin Chengjin looked at each other. Then, Lin Chengjin smiled and walked forward. A one-on-one battle? I'm afraid you can't afford to lose. Hearing this, the man's face darkened. What do you mean? You're saying we can't afford to lose? Humph. Looks like you're very confident. Isn't that so? If this is a one-on-one battle and you lose, you'll be angry and attack us. Isn't that child's play? Lin Chungjin chuckled and glanced at them. I don't think you're men who keep your promises. Hearing this, everyone's eyes flashed. They could guess the other party's intentions. However, if they went back on their words, wouldn't that mean that they couldn't afford to lose? Couldn't beat them? Which supremacy of the cerulean planet are you the disciple of? You're quite brave, aren't you? The man sized him up. My master is CK, Lin Chungjin said. Oh, so you're the disciple of Supremacy C Quebec. I'll have to learn from you then. The man said to the people behind him. Senior brothers and junior brothers, do they think we don't dare to fight one-on-one? They even provoked us with words. Do you think we dare to fight one-on-one with them? Ha ha ha. Who's afraid of who? If we fight one-on-one, we'll be cowards. That's right. We've had a lot of group fights along the way. Let's have a one-on-one fight. I'd like to see what's so great about the blue planet. Finally, the man with the surname Wang walked out and stated, I'll go first. His gaze swept over the crowd and landed on Gretchen. Junior sister Guan, what do you think about it? Are you sure you want to go first? You're my fiancé, so why don't we have a friendly match? Gretchen gritted her teeth. Just when she was about to step forward, Pei Zixuan pressed down on her shoulder. He walked forward and said, Junior sister Guan is a female. You are a man fighting against a female. Even if you win, it would be an unfair victory. I am her eldest senior brother. How about I challenge you first in this battle? The man with the surname Wang didn't force the issue. After all, it wouldn't be outstanding even if he won against a woman. However, it would be a different story if he won against Venerable Sik's eldest disciple, Pei Zixuan. He sized up Pei Zixuan with a glance and curled his lips into a cold smile. All right, since you want to take the lead, then I'll accept your challenge. Let's see what you're capable of. As he spoke, he walked forward. Pei Zixuan also walked forward. He raised his hand and gestured for the people behind him to step back and make space for them. Chapter 31:22. Just by glancing at the two people below, she knew that Pei Zixuan would definitely win in this one-on-one fight. As CK's eldest disciple, Pei Zixuan's strength was obvious to all. He would definitely win the first battle, and it was a one-on-one fight. Below, the people on both sides retreated, and the two also pulled apart the distance between them. As their spiritual power surged, they rushed forward and unsheathed their swords to attack each other. A piercingly cold sword chi shot out with a swoosh, bringing with it a sharp sound of breaking through the air. Sword shadows shot out like shuttles, and when the two swords collided, a clear clanging sound rang out. The two swords were pressed against each other, and the distance between the two of them was shortened to only a step. Both of their auras did not give way to each other, and they were like two ferocious beasts, their bodies surging with powerful battle intent. As Pei Zixuan's sword slid down, sparks also flew out. Hiss! The ear-piercing sound caused the spectators to frown. They saw the two people fighting in front of them. Their movements and sword shadows were extremely fast, just like ghosts. Both of them had the strength of the peak of the Yuanying realm, but there was some difference in their combat power. Compared to the other party, Pei Zixuan's fighting strength was obviously better. After a dozen moves, the other party was gradually at a disadvantage. Pei Zixuan's face was still calm and steady, but the other party's forehead was already covered in sweat, and he could not hold on any longer. Because the more frightened and flustered he was, the more his fighting strength declined, and his strength and speed could not keep up. He was a little flustered and was unprepared, and was kicked out by Pei Zixuan. He flew out 10 meters and crashed into his fellow disciples, who supported him. You've lost, Pei Zixuan said in a low voice, and the sword in his hand was kept behind him. The man stared at him fiercely, and pushed away the people supporting him, saying, Who said I've lost? I haven't admitted defeat. He held his sword and attacked again. His speed was so fast that Pei Zixuan, who had already put away his sword, could not dodge in time and retreated step by step. Seeing that the other party's sword was about to stab his chest, Pei Zixuan's eyes flashed, and he immediately dodged to the side. With a turn of his foot, he snatched the other party's sword from the side, and at the same time, he turned his hand, and the sword was held against the other party's neck. "Do you admit defeat now?" Pei Zixuan asked, lowering his sword. The sharp sword qi slashed across his neck, causing a trace of blood to seep out. The pain from his neck caused the man with the surname Wang to stiffen. He gritted his teeth and said, "I admit defeat. Since you admit defeat, hand over the things on your body." Pei Zixuan said, but the sword on his neck did not leave. Hearing this, his expression changed slightly. Sternness flashed across his eyes. He stiffened his body, unwilling to take out his item. "Don't tell me you want to go back on your word?" Pei Zixuan said as he pressed down on the sword on his neck as a warning. "Pei Zixuan, if you dare to injure me, my Wang clan will not let this matter rest," he threatened fiercely. Pei Zixuan's eyes narrowed when he saw this. He coldly glanced at the man before extending his hand to remove everything on the man's body, including the spatial rings and other things. Only after putting everything away did he remove the sword in his hand. "If you can't afford to lose, you shouldn't have fought with me." As Pei Zixuan spoke, he stabbed the sword in his hand into the ground. The sword stabbed into the ground and shook slightly. Chapter 31:23. Seeing this, one of the men gestured to the other man. The other party paused for a moment before walking out. He looked at Pei Zixuan and said, "As expected of Venerable CK's eldest disciple, your combat strength is indeed not weak. Since that's the case, let me take you on." Therefore, another man walked out and exchanged blows with Pei Zixuan. However, after the two of them exchanged over a dozen blows, the other man was also defeated by Pei Zixuan. However, after one of them lost, the other walked out. After 5 or 6 consecutive exchanges, one of the older men walked out with a smile. "What a surprise! You actually defeated 6 of our disciples in a row. Since that's the case, I have no choice but to take action." As the man spoke, he took out the sword at his waist and held it in his hand. He looked at Pei Zixuan, whose aura was slightly chaotic, and revealed an ambiguous smile. "I hope you can win again this time. Otherwise, all the things you won will fall into my hands." Looking at the person in front of him, Pei Zixuan's expression was somewhat grave. At this moment, he was a little tired and his aura was somewhat unstable. After all, he had fought 6 rounds in a row. Moreover, his opponent had fought with their lives on the line in every round, and he had also fought with all his strength. After 6 rounds, his aura was already slightly chaotic, and his physical strength and spiritual energy had been greatly consumed. Now that he was facing this person again, he was not confident in his heart. Could he still win? Especially this person. Previously, those people had walked out to challenge him under this person's gaze. The other party had originally planned to exhaust his physical strength. Now that he was facing him, he really did not know if he could win again. "This is not fair. You have already fought 6 rounds with him. You have changed 6 people, but he has not changed at all. This round I will take over," Guaziki said as he was worried that Pei Zixuan would not be able to handle it due to the excessive consumption of his spiritual energy. Who wants to fight with you?" "I want to fight with him." "What about it? Do you want to go back on your word?" The man sneered. It was obvious that he had specially picked Pei Zixuan to fight. As long as he won this battle, he would naturally be able to take back the things he had lost earlier. On the tree, Fengzhou curled her lips as she watched the scene below, but did not make a sound. She actually wanted to see how long Pei Zixuan could last. At the sight of this, Lin Qingjin's gaze flickered and he smiled. "Eldest senior brother, you've won so much. Shouldn't you share some with us?" Hearing this, Mu Ling smiled. "That's right. I want some too." Pei Zixuan was stunned when he heard this, and then he smiled. "Right, isn't it too selfish to only keep it for yourself? Since it's like this, then I'll share some of the things I won with all of you." As he spoke, he took out the things he'd won. Seeing this scene, the expressions of those people changed. If this was the case, then they would have to challenge the person who possessed those things if they wanted to take back those things. Damn it! Originally, as long as they fought with him and defeated him, they would be able to take back those things. They did not expect the people of Cerulean Star to be so treacherous. Fengjiu smiled when she heard this. Lin Qingjin's thoughts were meticulous, and ordinary people would not be able to scheme against him. In this way, he could divert the opponent's battle against Pei Zixuan. Even if they lost this round, they would not lose everything. Chapter 31-24. Lin Qingjin, Mu Ling and Su Kaiji separated the items into 3 portions and kept them. As the items were divided, the 3 of them were also targeted by the other people. Come on, let's end this quickly. Pei Zixuan looked at the man and said. While they were dividing the items, he had also relaxed a little. However, it was impossible for his physical strength and spiritual power to keep up. The man narrowed his eyes and retreated a bit with his sword in hand. The aura of spiritual energy on his body surged, and a fierce, murderous aura spread out from his body. Just the surge of his aura made people feel that it was very different. Even though they were both at the peak of the nascent soul stage, this person did not hide his murderous aura, and this made Mu Ling and the rest nervous. Whoosh! Clang! When the sword and saber clashed, a fierce aura shot out and a cold, murderous aura spread. The 2 of them were like swimming dragons. Between the sword and saber, a murderous aura overflowed, especially the man on the other side. Every move was fatal, and he looked as if he wanted to kill Pei Zixuan. This person wants to kill Zixuan. Mu Ling said in a low voice and looked ahead with a cold gaze. They were all disciples of the 4 sects, and if there was no great enmity between them, they would not kill other disciples here. But this person's attacks were unusually vicious, and every move was fatal. They could not help but break out in cold sweat for Mu Ling. If his reaction was slightly slower, death would be waiting for him. It was one thing when they had just exchanged blows, but after a long battle, Pei Zixuan, whose physical strength could not keep up, was afraid that. The sword shadow flashed past, cutting through a tree not far away. With a swoosh, a deep sword mark was left on the trunk of the big tree. The fallen leaves fluttered in the air along with the vibrating sword chi and slowly fell to the ground. The 2 swords clashed continuously. However, after more than 10 moves, Pei Zixuan was suppressed and retreated step by step. Gradually, he was in a sorry state. The other party saw the sword and took the opportunity to attack. A sword aura flashed past and Pei Zixuan's arm was slashed. Hiss! He sucked in a breath of air and felt a chill seeping out from the wound. That cold feeling was like an ice cube that quickly entered his body, causing him to involuntarily shiver. Fengjiu squinted his eyes when he saw this. There's poison on the blade. When the man holding the sword sneered and took a step forward to take Pei Zixuan's life, the others retreated more than 10 meters and were unable to help in time. Pei Zixuan was cut by the sword, and one of his arms felt stiff and heavy, making it difficult for him to lift it. Moreover, as he circulated the spiritual energy in his body, it made the poison in his body flow faster. Suddenly, he felt his blood rush up, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Pooh! Eldest senior brother. Zixuan. Senior brother. Eldest senior brother. Cries of alarm rang out as Mu Ling and the rest rushed forward. However, no matter how fast they were, they could not outrun the poisoned sword in the man's hand. Just as the sword was about to pierce through the space between the man's eyebrows, everyone saw a white figure leap down from the tree. With a light flick of his sleeve, the man holding the sword was sent flying. Bang! Pooh! He fell heavily to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. He clutched his chest with one hand and stared fiercely at the figure that had suddenly appeared. Chapter 31-25. Fengjiu glanced at him indifferently, then used her hand to seal a few of Pei Zixuan's major acupoints. Mu Ling and the rest rushed up from behind to support him. Then she glanced at the man on the ground. Give me the antidote. Her voice was indifferent, but there was an inexplicable majesty in it. Her imposing manner caused the hearts of the surrounding people to tighten as they tried to guess the identity of this person. even though the white-robed youth in front of them was wearing the robes of the Cerulean Star Immortal Sect. His powerful aura still made them somewhat suspicious. Were all the disciples of the Cerulean Star so powerful? He sent a nascent soul stage cultivator flying with one strike? Antidote? There's no antidote. The man on the ground said as he stared coldly at Pei Zixuan. You're dead meat. Guaziki and the rest panicked when they heard this. There's no antidote? Then what should they do? Could it be that this poison is very powerful? Senior brother Zixuan will die here? There's no antidote? Fengzhou asked casually. She slowly walked forward and came to the side of the sharp sword that had fallen to the side. With a stomp and a flick of her foot, she picked up the sword that had fallen to the ground and held it in her hand. She twirled the long sword in her hand and a cold light flashed in front of everyone. Before anyone could react, the sharp blade of the sword pierced towards the chest of the disciple on the ground. Ah! Senior brother he! Senior brother he! A blood-curdling scream rang out and the surrounding disciples also cried out in alarm. However, no one stepped forward. They watched as the white-robed youth calmly pierced the sword into their senior brother he's chest. Their hearts couldn't help but rise to their throats. If the sword had been slightly off course, they were afraid that the sword would have pierced right through their senior brother he's chest. At that time, even if the sword wasn't poisoned, there would be no saving him. The sharp sword pierced through his chest and the poison quickly seeped into the disciple's body. This shocked the disciple and he quickly took out the antidote. However, before he could open the antidote, he endured his fear and took it away with a flick of the sword in the youth's hand. Give me back the antidote. The disciple cried out in alarm and wanted to snatch it back. However, due to the pain from his wound, he groaned and fell back to the ground. Fengzhou glanced at him and unhurriedly opened the lid to take a sniff. Her eyes were still on the man who had fallen to the ground. When she saw him staring at her, her heart trembled slightly. When she smelled the scent of the medicine from the bottle, the corners of her lips slightly curled into a smile. But in the eyes of that man, this smile was as terrifying as a demon. This is the antidote. Hearing these words and seeing the young man walking over with the bottle of medicine, he panicked and hurriedly said, I'll take it! An antidote and the real antidote. Don't come here, don't. As soon as he said this, the surrounding people realized that he had pretended to take out the antidote, but he had actually taken out the poison. At a time like this, he still had the mind to harm others? In an instant, everyone looked at him with complicated gazes, especially the disciples who were on his side. They were on their guard. If they were careless, would they fall into his trap as well? It was worrying to be on the same side as someone like him. Chapter 31:26. No, don't. Instinctively, he felt that this young man was not joking. He really would dare to kill him. Antidote, this is the antidote. If you don't believe me, I'll take it too. I'll take it too. He quickly took out the real antidote and swallowed one pill. Then, he endured the pain in his chest and handed it to Fengzhou with both hands. Fengzhou glanced at it and reached out to take it. She opened it and sniffed it, then turned around and handed the antidote to Mu Ling. Feed it to him. However, at this moment, the man on the ground saw Fengzhou turn around and pulled out the dagger in his boot and charged forward. Be careful! Gretchen and the others cried out in alarm. They quickly rushed forward, but no matter how fast they were, they could not outrun the man who had pulled out his sword and charged forward. However, Fengzhou did not even turn around. She only glanced at him, then dodged to the side and kicked him away. Roar! At this moment, Tun Yun, who was squatting on the tree, was enraged. He leaped down from the tree and transformed into his original form, pouncing on the man who had been thrown out. Blood flowed from the man's mouth, but he still held the dagger in his hand. He was about to stand up when Tun Yun pounced on him and pressed him down. Tun Yun opened his mouth and bit off the man's hand that was holding the dagger. Hiss! A blood-curdling scream rang out. The smell of fresh blood filled the air as the man's arm was bitten off. This bloodthirsty and cruel scene frightened the cultivators who were about to step forward. They all cried out in alarm. Ah! Super divine beast. The disciples were all stunned. Seeing the powerful aura released from Tun Yun's body, their legs turned to jelly. The mother beast on the tree saw that Tun Yun had transformed into his original form and also transformed into his original form. Seeing the other little beast transform into a level 7 divine beast, the surrounding people were all stunned. They all looked on in shock and fear. Compared to the disciples, Mu Ling and the others finally understood why they had not met any ferocious beasts along the way when they saw the 2 Tun Yun beasts. With these 2 powerful vicious beasts following them, which vicious beast would be so blind to pounce on them? Looking at the scene in front of them again, the man's arm was torn off along with his robes. The bloody scene and the brutal scene made them shudder with fear. It was too terrifying. It was really tearing at the slightest disagreement. How could a human's body withstand the tearing and chewing of a divine beast? That man was also seeking his own death. He clearly didn't make a move against him, and obviously didn't want to let him go. Yet he still rushed to his own death. Who could he blame for ending up like this? Tun Yun stepped on the man's body and pressed him to the ground. It glanced at the man who was screaming in fear, then turned to Fengjiu and asked, "Master, how should we execute this man?" The moment it opened its mouth, it was clear that it didn't care about the man's life at all. However, no one said anything because they felt that it was better to speak less in front of a super divine beast. Don't kill me. I am a disciple of the 4 sections. The disciples of the 4 sects can't kill each other. Chapter 31:27. Fengjiu glanced at the man and said calmly, "Since we are all disciples of the 4 sects, give him a quick death." "Yes." Swallowing Cloud replied. In the next moment, the man screamed in fear and snapped his neck. Behind him, Mu Ling and the others wanted to speak but saw that the man was already dead. They moved their lips but could not say a word. Mu Ling, in particular, was even more shocked. This was Fengjiu, the master of their patriarch. The dignity of the strong was not to be violated. Especially those who had the intention to kill, they would not let them off easily. You. The disciples retreated in fear. If it was just the disciples of the Cerulean planet, it would be one thing. But now, there was another with unfathomable power. Moreover, there was a sacred beast and a level 7 sacred beast. They would only rush forward if they wanted to die. "What about us?" Fengjiu glanced at them and said calmly, "Don't tell me you want to try his fate?" When he said this, the people shook their heads in shock. "No, we don't dare." "Oh, is that so? Then how did he die?" Fengjiu asked as his gaze swept across the people. When they heard this, their hearts tightened and they hurriedly said, He was attacked by a ferocious beast and died. We promise that we will not say a word about what happened here. Not a word." These people were worried that the other party would kill them all if he wanted to kill them. They could not help but quickly promise. In the end, they even swore. Seeing this, Fengjiu curled his lips. "Very good. Remember your words. Otherwise, if I remember one day, I will go to your sects and have a chat with you." When they heard this, their expressions changed and they all looked at the young man with pale faces. If they had been thinking of going back and telling their masters to teach this young man a lesson, they had all given up now. This person was a madman. They would be crazy to provoke him. "Get lost," Fengjiu said and glanced at them indifferently. She was not afraid of getting into trouble for killing a disciple of the sect. However, CK and Mu Xian were afraid of being punished by the sect. They had threatened these people to keep their mouths shut. Looking at the sacred beast and the rank 7 divine beast, other than Mu Ling, Pei Zixuan, Lin Chengjin, and the rest all looked at him with complicated gazes. The scene in front of them was so clear that they couldn't even pretend to be confused. "Mujiu, can you tell us who you are?" Su Kaiji asked as his gaze fell on the young man in white. When he heard this, the corners of Mu Ling's mouth twitched. He remembered what Fengjiu. She was his ancestor. These words sounded very impolite and presumptuous, but after thinking about it carefully, he came to his senses. Wasn't she his ancestor? There was such a great ancestor in front of him. and he still asked who she was. She was the ancestor of the Mu family, so she was naturally the ancestor of the Su family. If someone else had asked this question, they would not have found it so strange. However, it was Su Kaiji. If she said, "I am your ancestor," what would everyone do? Chapter 31:28. He was not the only one. Other than Mu Ling, everyone was curious. They wanted to know who he was. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Fengjiu smiled. "My name is Fengjiu. My name is Fengjiu." When these words came out, everyone was stunned for a moment. Fengjiu? What a familiar name. They seemed to have heard it somewhere before. When Fei Kaiji heard this name, he was stunned for a while before his eyes widened. He looked at the young man in front of him in shock. You are Fengjiu? Then wasn't that his family's ancestor?" He looked at Mu Ling. "You already knew?" Mu Ling smiled bitterly. "I knew a little earlier than you." Fengjiu? Shen Yuan Mose and Fengjiu? It was them? It was her? Pei Zixuan and Lin Chengjin were shocked. The young man in front of them was a woman? He was their ancestor's master? No matter how they guessed Mu Jiu's identity, they did not expect him to be their ancestor's master. He was one of the two people who caused a ruckus in the 4 major immortal sects competition and became famous in the 4 major immortal sects. Fengjiu was said to be an alchemy venerable level alchemist. No wonder he had a sacred beast. No wonder he had a level 7 divine beast following him. No wonder they were able to turn misfortunes into blessings. They had a peak heavenly god level expert with them. Is that the master of Venerable CK and Venerable Mu Xian? Zheng Hai stared at Fengjiu with wide eyes. He could not believe his eyes. "So you are a woman? And you are a peak heavenly god?" Heavens! They were actually training together with her. No wonder they were able to turn misfortunes into blessings. His luck was too good. He actually met Fengjiu here. Fengjiu looked at them and said, "I came here to find a 1,000-year-old elixir. I didn't plan to get involved." She said helplessly. Initially, he didn't intend to get involved, but along the way he made several moves. Furthermore, the restriction in this place had disappeared. Could only be said that many things were unexpected. Hearing this, everyone finally realized that she had come here to look for 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs. Thinking about it, it made sense. She was an alchemy venerable, so she would definitely be a little paranoid about spiritual medicines. She actually dared to take such a huge risk and enter. It had to be known that when the restrictions were still in place, her strength was completely suppressed. She was not much stronger than them at all. Fengjiu looked at them and said, "It's getting more and more dangerous inside. Even if you know who I am, I suggest that you leave this place first. The deeper you go, the more dangerous it is for you." "We're not afraid," Zheng Hai said. "We can do it." Fengjiu glanced at him indifferently, and his tone became more and more impolite. He said directly, "If I don't protect you, you won't survive a day in here. What's more, you're delaying my journey." Hearing this, the crowd could not help but fall silent. That was true. If she had not protected them, how could they have survived the attack of the divine beast? Perhaps without her, they really wouldn't survive a day. Seeing this, Mu Ling thought for a moment, then looked at the crowd behind him and said, "How about this? You all go out first. This place is indeed not suitable for training. We have to tell the outside world that the restrictions have loosened." Chapter 31:29. Lin Chengjin glanced at Mu Ling and smiled. "It's better for me to follow too. I know where the 1,000-year black spiritual tendons are. This will save you a lot of time." "Then I want to follow too, Su Kaiji said, but was interrupted before he could finish. "All right, just the 3 of them will follow me, the rest can leave." Fengjiu looked at them and said, "You guys go out first. The commotion in the mystic realm is so big, I think if the sects outside know, they will definitely send supremacies in. Before your lives are in danger, hurry and leave this place." Hearing this, everyone looked at each other and nodded. "All right, then we will leave tomorrow. It's already late, we can wait for another night before leaving." Let's deal with the corpse, Fengjiu said and glanced at the corpse not far away. Hence, 2 disciples went forward to deal with the corpse. They returned to the fire to eat roasted meat and warm the fire. However, because they knew Fengjiu's identity, their gazes always fell on her. In the end, Fengjiu directly jumped onto a tree to rest. The 2 clouds swallowing divine beasts shrunk and lay under the tree, narrowing their eyes as they looked around. Why don't you let me follow? He is also our Su family's founder. Su Kaiji looked at Mu Ling and the rest with some confusion. Mu Ling and the rest smiled but did not say much. Among the 3 of them, 2 of them were their master's eldest disciples. As for Lin Changjin, because he knew the location of the 1,000-year black spiritual tendons, it was natural for him to follow. Of course, they knew that out of so many people, only the 3 of them followed. They might feel a little unbalanced, but they had no choice. Brother, you have to be careful in here. You must take good care of yourself. Lin Yushi reminded him worriedly. Lin Changjin smiled. Don't worry. I know. Don't worry about me. I will be very safe in here. With a peak heavenly god expert, as well as a sacred beast and a level 7 divine beast guarding them, even if they were to meet any ferocious beasts, they would definitely be safe. Mu Ling and Pei Zixuan both instructed their junior brothers to keep their mouths shut about Fengjiu. Everyone also expressed that they understood and wouldn't talk too much about this matter. That night, because they knew that there were 2 powerful divine beasts guarding them, and Fengjiu was also here, they slept very soundly. It wasn't until the next morning when the sun shone through the forest and shone on their bodies that they slowly woke up. It's daybreak? They sat up, rubbed their eyes, and composed themselves. They saw that Fengjiu, Mu Ling, and the others were ready to leave and were looking at them. Seeing this, they didn't say anything. They just stood up, bowed to them, and said goodbye. Then, they crushed their teleportation jade tablets and left the secret realm. As they left, Fengjiu looked at the 3 people beside him and said, "Follow me. Unless it is absolutely necessary, they won't show their true form and release their aura. So, for the rest of the journey you have to be 120% alert." Chapter 31:30. Under the morning sun, for figures lightly tiptoed through the dense forest. The morning birds and insects chirped between the branches and leaves. The few of them moved very quickly, especially with Fengjiu leading the way. The 3 of them followed behind, not daring to slow down at all. If they did, she would disappear into the dense forest in the blink of an eye. They did not rest for the entire morning. The 3 of them followed Fengjiu in front and were already panting and sweating profusely. Their physical strength was gradually unable to keep up. It was also at this moment that the figure in front finally stopped. "Let's rest for a while," Fengjiu said as she leapt onto a tree to rest. The 3 of them panted as they reached the tree. After looking up, they supported themselves against the tree for a while. When their breathing gradually stabilized, they sat down and took out some water to drink. 3 fruits were thrown into their arms. The 3 of them caught them, thanked him, and began to eat. Fengjiu leaned against the tree and closed her eyes to rest. However, when she released her divine sense, she faintly heard a cry for help. Even though the voice was very weak when she heard it, she still opened her eyes and looked in a certain direction. When the 3 people under the tree saw this, they could not help but stand up. "What's wrong?" "Front left. You guys go and help," Fengjiu said and gestured for the 3 of them to go. Hearing this, the 3 of them were startled for a moment and quickly went in the direction she indicated. After they had moved about 500 meters, they saw a few disciples being chased by a few ferocious beasts. The disciples were covered in wounds and were covered in blood. It was almost impossible to distinguish the original color of their robes. "Senior brother, save us." When the disciples saw the 3 of them, they hurriedly called for help and staggered towards them. Seeing the ferocious beasts behind them open their mouths and pounce towards them, the 3 of them quickly made their move. Show! 3 rays of sword chi shot out. The sharp sword chi cut open a wound on the ferocious beast. Blood dripped from the wound and the ferocious beast changed its target. Roar! With a deafening sound, the beast's sharp claws flashed and swiped at Lin Changjin. Lin Chungjin spun the sword in his hand and chopped off the beast's claws. Roar! The claw was cut off and blood seeped out. The ferocious beast let out a shrill cry and quickly retreated, not daring to move forward. The other ferocious beasts bared their sharp teeth and hissed. One of them roared at the sky. In the next moment, the other ferocious beasts pounced on the three of them with a fierce and bloodthirsty look. They bit fiercely at the three of them. The disciples were so scared that their faces turned pale. They wanted to go forward and help, but they couldn't help but retreat until they hit a big tree behind them. What they didn't see was that Fengjiu was also watching the battle in front of them from the tree they were standing on. The fierce beasts were fighting against Mu Ling and the other two. The fighting strength of those fierce beasts wasn't low. Facing the danger of death, the three of them didn't dare to have a trace of luck. They fought with all their strength, and because of this, their fighting spirit surged, causing the atmosphere in the air to slightly condense. Chapter 31:31. On the big tree, among the dense leaves, a youth wearing the robes of the Blue Star Immortal Sect stood between the branches. Because the sunlight shining down from above was too dazzling, they could not see his face clearly. They used their hands to block the sunlight, and when they looked up again, the youth's unremarkable face was reflected in their eyes. If we can't find its weakness with so many attacks, it's just a waste of energy, Fengjiu said indifferently. He continued to look at the scene in front of him. Even when he saw the three of them being attacked and injured by the beasts, he did not help. Weakness? What was the weakness of these beasts? Lin Qingjin's eyes flashed as he stared at one of the beasts. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. He leaped up and directly sat on the back of the beast. No matter how the beast shook and hit him, he did not get off. Instead, he clamped his legs tightly together and suddenly raised his sharp sword, fiercely stabbing it into the top of the beast's head. Ayo! The long sword pierced into the beast and a shrill scream suddenly sounded. The sound cut through the air and reverberated in their ears for a long time. When he pulled out the long sword, a column of blood splashed out at the same time. The ferocious beast finally fell forward, its whole body lying on the ground, twitching for a while until its whole body stiffened and died. Seeing this, Mu Ling and Pei Zixuan also changed their attack to the top of the beast's head. Not long after, the other beasts either died or escaped. As the crisis was over, the three of them took a deep breath and looked at the corpses of the beasts on the ground and kept their long swords. The few disciples stared blankly at this scene and suddenly regained their senses. They hurriedly thanked them. Thank you, Senior Brother Mu, Senior Brother Pei, and Senior Brother Lin for saving us. Hearing this, the three of them were slightly moved. You know us? We are also disciples of the Blue Star Immortal Sect, so we know you three senior brothers. As they spoke, they lowered their heads to look at their tattered robes that were stained with blood and their original color could not be distinguished. Then, they thought of the narrow escape from death and could not help but cry. Seeing the few people standing in front of them crying silently, the three of them were startled. What are you doing? It was fine if the female disciples were crying, but why were the male disciples crying as well? Senior brother, out of the 12 people in our team, only a few of us are still alive. The rest are all dead. They died under the claws of the vicious beasts. They sobbed as they looked at the three people in front of them and said, Our teleportation jade tablets also disappeared when we were escaping. We can't leave this place. We can only wait here until the end of the training time and be teleported out. However, there are very powerful, ferocious beasts here. I'm afraid we won't be able to get out alive. Hearing this, the three of them could not help but frown slightly. No teleportation jade token? That would be troublesome. For a moment, the three of them couldn't help but look at the Fengjiu on the tree, silently asking how they should deal with this matter. Seeing their gazes, Fengjiu took out his wine gourd and drank a mouthful of wine. His expression was somewhat lazy. Why are you looking at me? I can't get out either. Hearing this, the three of them thought for a moment and said to the few disciples, You guys sit down and rest first. Treat your wounds and let us think of a way. Chapter 31:32. Mu Ling and the other two discussed. She probably won't agree to bring them along. If we leave them behind, they'll probably die here soon. Without the transportation formation, there are only two ways. One is to be automatically teleported out after the training ends. The other is that someone from outside the secret realm can come in and bring a transportation jade token. Otherwise, they'll really. What do we do now? We can't just leave them behind, right? Why don't we let them go outside? Compared to the inside, the chances of survival in the outer regions are higher. The problem is that they won't be able to go outside. It's not like you don't know how dangerous the journey is. The three of them discussed for a while but couldn't come up with a solution. In the end, they had no choice but to go to Fengjiu. You decide. Fengjiu glanced at them and said, "It's only about 2 months until we get out. Since we don't have a transportation jade token, we'll wait here. When the training ends, we'll be automatically teleported out." She jumped down from the tree and said, "There's a cave not far from here. You can stay there. I'll set up a barrier outside the cave to prevent ferocious beasts from getting close and injuring you." Hearing this, Mu Ling and the other two heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that she was willing to help. As long as she was willing to help, they believed that there was no problem that couldn't be solved. "We still have some distress signals from the sects here. Take them. We guessed that the supremacies from the sects outside will come in, so you can release a distress signal once in a while. If a supremacies see it, they may be able to bring you out of the secret realm in advance." Pei Zixuan said and passed the signals to them. "Thank you, senior brother." They received the signals and thanked him. Then they followed Fengjiu and left the place. They walked further ahead and found a cave. Fengjiu set up a barrier outside the cave and said, "As long as you stay in this barrier and don't come out, no matter how strong the ferocious beasts are, they won't be able to break it. However, you must remember that once you walk out of this barrier, it will be destroyed along with you." "We definitely won't go out," they promised. Knowing that they would not bring them along, they could only hide here to recuperate and wait for the training to end. Lin Chungjin helped them release a distress signal before saying, "We'll be leaving first. Take care of yourselves. Here are some fasting pills. Keep them. These should be enough to last you until you get out." "Thank you, senior brother Lin." They thanked him again. Mu Ling and the others cupped their hands and bowed, then followed Fengjiu and left. Not long after they left, 2 venerables from the Blue Star Immortal sect flew over from the sky. They looked around and found the cave. "Are there any disciples of the Blue Star Immortal sect here?" One of the venerables' voice contained a powerful pressure. Because they could not see inside the cave and there was a barrier outside, they could not get close. The disciples who had just sat down to rest in the cave were startled when they heard this voice. This voice sounds like Master's. Chapter 31-33. Master! They shouted and quickly helped each other out of the boundary. Sure enough, as they walked out of the boundary, the airflow in the air shook and the boundary disappeared into thin air. The 2 supremacies looked at the strange boundary and couldn't help but be shocked. They looked at each other and quickly walked forward to look at them. Seeing that their bodies were covered in blood, they couldn't help but ask worriedly, "How did you guys get injured like this? Why are there only a few of you? Where are the senior and junior brothers who teamed up with you?" "Master, there were 12 of us in our group. However, the others all perished in here. Fortunately, we were saved by senior brother Mu Ling, senior brother Pei Zixuan, and senior brother Lin Chungjin. There's one more person we haven't seen before." As they spoke, they did not know who the young man who had set up the barrier for them was. Hearing this, the 2 supremacies were slightly surprised. "You guys met them? Were they the ones who set up this barrier? Where did they go?" They asked a series of questions because the 3 of them weren't ordinary people. Why did they leave after coming here? The boundary was set up by another person. We haven't seen that person before. One of the disciples said, "We only met the 4 of them, but they didn't stay here. After they set up a barrier to protect us, they left and went in that direction." That disciple pointed in the direction that the 4 of them had left in before he spoke. "You guys are injured to this extent. Why don't you use the teleportation jade token to leave? As he spoke, the supremacies looked at their waists and couldn't help but frown. Where are your teleportation jade tokens? We lost our teleportation jade tokens when we were being chased by the ferocious beasts. The few of them lowered their heads and said, it was because of this that they couldn't leave this place. Hearing this, the other supremacies smiled. It's okay. I'm prepared. As he spoke, he took out a few white jade tokens and said to the few of them, come, drip a drop of your blood into it. When the time comes, crush the jade token and leave. Quickly return to the sect to recuperate. Thus, the few of them followed the supremacy's instructions. After reactivating the teleportation jade token, they crushed it and left. After the few of them left, the two supremacies looked at each other and said, the person who set up the boundary is not simple. That's right, among the disciples no one has such ability. Let's go. Let's catch up with them and get them out of here quickly. One of the venerable ones said and shook his head. These people are really something. Why are they still staying here when they know that it's dangerous? What a mess. As they spoke, the two of them quickly chased in the direction that the disciple had mentioned. On the other hand, Fengjiu was leading Pei Zixuan and the other two through the dense forest. Naturally, he didn't know that two venerables were chasing after them from behind. In the dense forest, Fengjiu stopped picking because he had discovered a spiritual herb. At this time, Lin Qingjin's voice sounded. It's there. It's that cliff on that side of the mountain. The 1,000-year black spirit tendons are there. Lin Qingjin pointed at the cliff in the distance and said excitedly, that's the place. It can't be wrong. Hearing this, Fengjiu looked in the direction he was pointing, and his gaze also fell on the cliff in the distance. The trees here did not block the view, so they could see the cliff in the distance at a glance. Chapter 31-34. Pei Zixuan and Mu Ling looked in that direction. Seeing that it was still quite a distance away, they said, it looks like it's not far away. However, if we want to get there, it'll take at least 1 or 2 days. If they walked in the dense forest, it would naturally take 1 or 2 days. However, they also knew that if they flew over directly on their swords, they would probably reach there in a day. However, in this dense forest, if they flew in the sky, they would probably be targeted by flying ferocious beasts and become the target of their attacks. Fengjiu, who was looking in the direction of the cliff, moved her ears slightly. She turned her head slightly to look behind her and vaguely sensed movement. She released her divine sense and looked in that direction. When she saw 2 supremacies from the Blue Star Immortal sect killing 2 ferocious beasts that were pouncing towards them, her eyes flashed slightly. The 2 of them followed from behind. Clearly, they had sent the disciples in the cave away. Seeing that they had easily killed the 2 ferocious beasts and were heading towards them, she immediately withdrew her divine sense and said to them, the 2 supremacies from the Blue Star are here. Do you want to go back with them? Hearing this, the 3 of them were slightly surprised. Supremacies really came in? Then let's go quickly so that they won't catch up. Hearing this, Fengjiu's lips curled up slightly. She glanced at the 3 of them and said, let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly rushed out. The 3 people behind her also quickly followed. Because they knew that the 2 supremacies were behind them, they did not dare to slow down. They were afraid that the 2 supremacies would catch up to them. Not long after they left, the 2 supremacies arrived. Their faces could not help but darken. These brats. Just now, one of them used his divine sense to detect us and actually ran away. This is outrageous. I think they don't want to go out and are intentionally avoiding us. The other supremacies said. He thought for a moment and said, they're not weak. It can even be said that they're the best among disciples of the same strength. Now that they're still being chased by us, they probably have the confidence to survive here. Instead of chasing a few disciples who are avoiding us, why don't we look for the others first? Hearing this, the first supremacies was silent for a moment. In the end, he nodded. All right, let's go. Thus, the 2 of them changed directions. As they walked, they used their spiritual power to call out to the disciples of the Blue Star Immortal sect. Sensing that the two supremacies were not following Fengzhou gradually, she slowed down and waited for the three people behind her. Seeing her slow down, the three of them asked, "Are they not following us?" "Let's go," Fengzhou said. Then, she heard a bang in the sky. It seemed that there was another distress signal. "It's a distress signal from the Qingcheng immortal sect," Mu Ling said, looking at the location. "It's quite a distance from us. Even if they wanted to go and take a look, they couldn't, because that place was too far away from them. They couldn't save him, but a supremacy from the Qingcheng celestial sect saw it and quickly rushed over." Chapter 31-35. On this evening, it was rare to see Fengzhou stop and roast wild game for them to eat. At this time, the three of them were already covered in wounds and looked extremely miserable. His black hair was a little messy, with a few strands of hair hanging down from his head. There were even leaves stuck on his head. His dirty and blood-stained robes were either torn by tree branches or scratched by the claws of ferocious beasts. Before the wounds had even scabbed over, new wounds had been added to them. The three of them did not look like the elegant young masters they used to be. "I've never worn such dirty clothes before," Lin Chungjin said with a smile as he bandaged the wound on his arm. He said, "It's only been 2 days, and there are already so many injuries on my body. Even master's training wasn't this harsh." "Hiss!" Mu Ling pulled at the wound on his back and could not help but gasp. He said to Pei Zixuan, "Do me a favor, sprinkle some medicine on the wound on my back." Pei Zixuan took over and helped him treat the wound. "This scar is not shallow, it will probably leave a scar. It's fine as long as I can keep my life. If there are scars, then there are scars," Mu Ling said nonchalantly. After all, he was not a girl, so he did not care much about scars. "If you want to eat, cut it yourself. After eating, quickly take the time to rest," Fengzhou said, and let the two little beasts guard the surroundings while she sat by the fire and ate the roasted meat. After the three of them treated their wounds, they tore off some roasted meat to eat. In the night, the few of them sat in a circle, and some of them leaned against a big tree to rest. Until the next morning, when the sky had just brightened, the few of them who were sleeping soundly were woken up and continued towards their destination. With their strength, they easily passed by the ferocious beasts at the foot of the mountain, avoided the dangers in the dense forest, and came to the side of the cliff. Fengzhou looked up and saw that they were halfway up the mountain, and on the side of the cliff, clouds and mist spread out, and the bottom of the cliff was endless. "You guys wait for me here," she said to the three people behind her. "Be careful." The three of them said, but they didn't follow. As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and directly stepped on the clouds in the air. She headed towards the mountainside of the cliff, leaving only the two mythical beasts to guard them. The mother beast watched as Fengzhou left and then looked at Tun Yun. She couldn't help but approach him and ask, "Aren't you going to follow him? Aren't you worried that Master will be in danger?" Swallow Cloud glanced at it and said, "You're still not leaving? Why are you following us?" "Master told me to leave with you, so of course I'll follow you." She looked at Tun Yun. "Furthermore, you are the strongest of my kind that I have ever seen." "I like you," Tun Yun scoffed. "You haven't seen anything stronger. Even if there are others, no matter how strong or powerful they are, I still think you're the strongest," the female beast said shyly. She moved closer to Tun Yun with a fawning look. The corners of the three people's mouths twitched as they watched. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have known that beasts knew how to sweet-talk. However, she had to take care of them. They were still standing at the side, and she was already acting as if no one else was around. If they left, wouldn't that be? Chapter 31-36. They looked ahead and saw Fengzhou leaping into the air. Not long after, a giant flying beast swooped down from the sky and grabbed at her with its claws. Seeing this, their hearts couldn't help but tighten. Fengzhou glanced at the flying beast that swooped down. Seeing the sharp claws grabbing at her, her figure flashed and dodged the attack. She flipped over and leaped onto the back of the flying beast. Just as the flying beast was about to counterattack, a powerful ancient pressure fiercely filled the air and shook the flying beast. The flying beast let out a sharp cry, and in the next moment its aura was retracted, and its flying speed was clearly slower. Go to the cliff in front. Fengjiu's voice contained a spiritual aura as she stood on the back of the flying beast and flew towards the cliff. Seeing this scene, Pei Zixuan and the other two couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This was strength that was strong enough to make any living being feel fear and obey obediently. At the cliff, halfway up the mountain, where clouds and mist pervaded, there was a 1,000-year-old black spirit tendon growing on the mountain wall. Fengjiu stopped halfway up the mountain and stood on the back of the flying beast. She saw that the black spirit tendon growing on the mountain wall had each tendon as thick as a finger. The entire spiritual medicine didn't have a single leaf, only the thick roots that were as thick as a finger. It grew close to the mountain wall and was blood-red with a sparkling luster. Seeing this, she couldn't help but reveal a smile. It's really a 1,000-year-old black spirit tendon, and the quality is excellent. It's a rare treasure. She praised from the bottom of her heart. Every single stalk was tightly attached to the mountain wall, and the surrounding area was covered by weeds. Beside the weeds, which was also the side of the black spirit tendons, was a deep and serene little cave. Within that little cave, at this moment, a jet-black poisonous snake was lying on its stomach. The poisonous snake stretched out its head and spat out its blood-red tongue, making a hissing sound. It was staring at Fengjiu and the flying beast outside with caution. Level 3 Divine Beast Black Gold Snake? Fengjiu raised his eyebrows and stared at the snake. You retreated on your own? Or do you want me to do it? That rank 3 black gold snake stuck out its tongue and stared at Fengjiu. Even though this human looked very weak, the aura on his body made it very afraid. That aura seemed to be the aura of an ancient mythological beast. However, when it thought of the spiritual medicine that it had guarded for so many years, it was unwilling to return it. Instead, it stared at the human standing on the flying beast with its cold and bloodthirsty snake eyes. This spiritual medicine is mine. It spoke in human language, flicked its tongue, and looked at Fengjiu threateningly. Hearing this, Fengjiu chuckled. You're the one protecting it, but it's not yours because you can't protect it today. She calmly looked at the black gold snake and said, I'm only sparing your life because you've been protecting it for so many years and you're a divine beast. Why? Do you still want to gamble your life for this stalk of spirit herb? Hearing Fengjiu's words, the black gold snake retreated into the cave and made a concession. Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled and patted the flying beast's head, letting it go closer to the mountain wall. Then she took out her digging tools and carefully prepared to dig out the 1,000-year-old black spirit tendon and move it into her space to plant it. In this way, if she needed to use medicine for meridians in the future, she could use the black spirit tendon. Chapter 31-37. Fengjiu's eyes turned cold, and the knife in her hand, which she had originally intended to use to dig out the elixir, directly shot towards the snake. The sharp chi blade was accompanied by the hissing sound of the snake's tongue. In the next moment, the flying beast's eyes narrowed slightly. It saw that the third-order divine beast black gold snake was nailed to the stone wall. In the midst of its miserable screams, the snake's tail curled up slightly and then weakly drooped down. It was nailed to the mountain wall halfway up the mountain, not moving at all. This made it more and more afraid of the human standing on its back, and it didn't dare to have the slightest thought of resisting. Even a third-level divine beast venomous snake was killed by her in one move. If it, a flying beast that wasn't even a divine beast, really wanted to bite back like that venomous snake, wouldn't it die even more miserably? Fengjiu coldly glanced at the dead black gold snake that was nailed to the 7th inch of its body. She originally didn't want to kill it, but she intended to let it go. But it wanted to kill her. Since that was the case, it couldn't be blamed for killing it. She took out another knife, carefully dug out the 1,000-year black spirit tendon, and transplanted it into her space. Finally, she pulled out the knife that nailed the black gold snake and threw the third-order divine beast black gold snake to the flying beast. I'll give it to you. Hearing this, The flying beast's eyes were filled with excitement and surprise. It flapped its wings and nodded slightly, letting out a cry. After thanking Fengjiu, it grabbed the snake with its claws and swallowed the snake's crystal chip. "Send me over there." Fengjiu pointed to the location where Lin Chungjin and the others were. The flying beast cried out and was about to send her away when it saw a few more flying beasts in the sky. Moreover, there were people standing on the backs of those flying beasts. "Boy, you're quite capable. You actually dug out the 1,000-year black spirit tendon before us," a man said, staring at Fengjiu and saying, "If you want to live, obediently hand over the 1,000-year black spirit tendon." Hearing this, Fengjiu chuckled. Her clear eyes swept over the 4 or 5 people and said, "Your strength is at the celestial sage level. It seems that you're not disciples of the celestial sect. Good that you know. We won't be merciful like the disciples of the 4 sects. Quickly hand it over and we can still spare your life." One of them shouted in a deep voice. The pressure of a celestial sage expert also swept towards Fengjiu. Who would have thought that his pressure would have no effect on Fengjiu? Seeing that the young man's face was still as calm as before, without the slightest bit of discomfort under the pressure, they couldn't help but frown as they sized him up. "Kid, who are you? You're not a disciple of the 4 sects, are you? You snuck in." Fengjiu chuckled. "It's good that you know. I won't be as merciful as the disciples of the 4 sections." Her clear eyes turned, carrying an inexplicable smile. "The last person who dared to steal my things and have ideas about me has already reported to the King of Hell. You few don't have eyes. Provoking me is your misfortune." Hearing these arrogant and murderous words, the few people's hearts tightened. They mobilized their spiritual chi and surrounded Fengjiu. At the same time, they shouted, "Kill this kid!" As soon as their voices fell, several figures flew out from the flying beasts. Several sharp swords suffused with cold light shot towards Fengjiu with murderous intent. Chapter 31-38. A cold green light was refracted, and the sharp sword chi collided with the other party's sword chi. There was a loud bang, and several chi waves spread out in all directions. The powerful sword chi shook the people away, and they retreated a few steps. After stabilizing their bodies, their eyes narrowed. "Brat, who are you? How could an ordinary kid withstand the pressure and sword chi of the few of them? Could it be that this brat's strength was stronger than theirs?" However, when their gazes landed on the emerald edge sword in the brat's hand, someone exclaimed, "The ancient mystical sword Emerald Edge. How did you get the ancient mystical sword Emerald Edge? There has clearly been no news of this ancient mystical sword for many years. So how did it end up in your hands? What's the point of talking so much with him? Let's kill this brat and take his sword, and it'll be ours," another man said as he stared viciously at Fengjiu. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. "There's only one sword. There are only 4 or 5 of you. How are you going to split it?" She smiled lightly and waved the emerald edge sword in her hand. "Let me help you." As soon as she finished speaking, she rushed out like a ghost and attacked the other party. Her speed was extremely fast, and her oppressive aura was also released as she fought. Almost at the instant she rushed out, the other party was stunned by her oppressive aura. With a twist of the green sword in her hand, a biting cold sword chi flew out. With just one sword strike, she killed the people around her. Hiss! Ah! A few screams rang out at the same time. The bodies of the few people stiffened, and their eyes were filled with disbelief and fear. A few figures fell straight down the cliff. When their mounts saw this scene, they cried out in alarm and flapped their wings to escape. After all, they were not contracted beasts of the few people. Seeing that the few people had died, they naturally left quickly. "Catch them." As Fengjiu spoke, she turned around and hovered in the air. She watched as the flying beast caught the corpses and returned to her side. Only then did she walk over and collect their space rings and chenquin pouches. Afterwards, she had the flying beast throw the corpses down the cliff. She put away the azure edge sword and returned. Lin Chungjin and the others were sitting in the forest. Not long after, they saw Fengjiu return. They quickly stood up and asked, "How was it? Did you pick the 1,000-year black spirit tendons?" Fengjiu smiled. "Got it." Hearing this, they looked at each other and smiled. "That's good. I've already picked the herbs, and I won't be staying here for long. Do you want to leave with me?" she asked, looking at the three of them. It's not very safe here. We'll follow you," the three of them said. She nodded and said, "All right, crush the teleportation token and leave now. You should also return to the sect to recuperate from your injuries." As she spoke, she looked at the mother beast. "You've really decided to leave with me?" The mother beast looked at Tun Yun and nodded heavily. Fengjiu smiled and glanced at the proud Tun Yun. With a wave of her sleeve, she put the two little beasts into the space. Lin Chungjin and the others took out the jade tokens at their waists. Just as they were about to crush them, a loud rumbling sound came from the sky. They couldn't help but pause and look up. Chapter 31-39. Dust and smoke billowed in the distance. The wind and dust pushed and pushed against each other, blurring the vision of the dense forest. They could only vaguely see that under the pouring dust and smoke, the trees below were also buried by the sand and rocks. Falling rocks rolled down from above and smashed into the ground. The rolling vibration lasted for about half an incense stick's worth of time until everything around them became quiet. The few of them held their breaths, their hearts in their mouths. Mu Ling's expression was solemn as he said, "That kind of mountain toppled over and buried all the trees below. I wonder if there was anyone there?" Pei Zixuan looked at Fengjiu and said, "Let's go over and take a look. I wonder if there's a buried disciple there." Lin Chungjin also looked at Fengjiu, hoping to go over and take a look. It was rare to see such a landslide. If there was a disciple buried below, he was afraid that. Hearing this, Fengjiu glanced at them and said, "Let's go. If we want to go out, it won't make much of a difference." As she spoke, she rode her sword and went over with them. At the same time, the surrounding people who heard the commotion could not help but rush over. Among them were a few supremacies from the immortal sects. When Fengjiu and the rest arrived, they saw that there were already a few supremacies from the immortal sects there. Seeing the four of them, the supremacies were very surprised. Two of them recognized Mu Ling and the rest and said, "You guys are actually here? It's so dangerous here. Why don't you guys leave?" Supremacies. Mu Ling and the rest recognized the supremacies from the immortal sects and hurriedly bowed. "We came to see if we need help." "Here. Quickly come over. There's someone buried here," a supremacies from the Qingcheng immortal sect said as they moved the rocks that were pressing down on the disciple below. Everyone heard the sound and quickly rushed over to help. The person was not buried very deeply. A few rocks propped up one of his arms, allowing them to quickly find the disciple. Everyone worked together to move the rocks away and rescue the disciple. They saw that his head was bleeding and his leg was fractured. His entire body was covered in dust and sand. He was so dirty that they could not see his face clearly. "It's a disciple from the Blue Star Immortal Sect," one of the venerables said as he recognized which sect the disciple belonged to from his dirty robes. Thinking that it wasn't a disciple of his immortal sect, he couldn't help but secretly let out a sigh of relief. It really is a disciple of the Blue Star Immortal Sect. Since there is one person here, there must be others. Hurry up and find him, the supremacy of the Blue Star Immortal Sect said as he asked Lin Chungjin and the others to help him to the side. First, treat the wound on his head and stop the bleeding. Don't let the blood keep flowing. As the Venerable One spoke, he handed the disciple over to Lin Chungjin and the others. Then, he went to the front and used his divine sense to check if there were any other disciples buried underground. "Here, there's another one here." His spiritual sense probed the life force under the soil, and he couldn't help but shout in surprise, "Who is the earth attribute cultivator? Come and help me. Let me do it. I'm of the earth element," a venerable from the Qingcheng Immortal School said. He walked forward and used his control over the soil to quickly move the soil away. Chapter 3140. Fengjiu himself was of the 5 elements attribute. Now that he saw this, he told Lin Chungjin and the others to help move the soil and save the people. Another one came out. This is a disciple of the Qingcheng immortal sect. What? Why is a disciple of our sect here? A venerable exclaimed. He originally thought that since the people buried here were disciples of the cerulean planet, the people buried here should also be disciples of the cerulean planet. Who would have thought that a disciple of the Qingcheng immortal sect would be buried here? Hiss! His leg. The venerable of the Qingcheng immortal sect quickly stepped forward. When he saw that the Qingcheng disciple's leg was smashed, he couldn't help but gasp. Fengjiu frowned and glanced at him. He didn't say anything and just helped to save those who could be saved. As time passed, more and more people rushed over. As more people joined in, the rescue became more and more successful. However, when the ferocious beast's roar spread all around, the people who were in the middle of rescuing people stiffened and turned around abruptly. They didn't know when it started, but there was a circle of fierce beasts surrounding them. Those fierce beasts bared their teeth and let out low growls. Their fierce and bloodthirsty eyes stared at the people. At this time, in addition to some of the injured disciples who were rescued and moved to the open space, there were also disciples from the various sects who heard the commotion. At this time, everyone was here, including some venerables. Disciples, get ready for battle. The venerables of several immortal sects immediately raised their voices and shouted. Their spiritual power auras spread out and clearly entered everyone's ears. The disciples also quickly prepared for battle. However, even with their masters here, even though there were many of them, they couldn't help but feel a little afraid at this time. Those fierce beasts were not low ranks. Each of them had a strong physique and a bloodthirsty appearance that made them shudder. If they fought, they really couldn't guarantee that they could survive among these fierce beasts. Seeing that everyone around them was alert and their bodies were tense, Mu Ling, Pei Zixuan, and Lin Chungjin couldn't help but look at Fengjiu. They knew that if they wanted to resolve the situation before them, there was actually a simpler way. Moreover, that method could also reduce the casualties of the disciples of the 4 sections. If they were to fight, almost half of the people here would die. Fengjiu glanced at the surrounding ferocious beasts. Because of the pouring of the mountain mud, the disciples of the 4 sects rushed here. Naturally, the ferocious beasts also came here. Among them, there were several mythological beasts. Seeing the venerables and disciples looking as if they were about to face a great enemy, Mu Ling and the other two's gazes also fell on her. She sighed silently. With a wave of her sleeve, Tun Yun quietly squatted beside her. Go! Fengjiu waved his sleeves and let it walk around. When Lin Chungjin, Pei Zixuan, and Mu Ling saw the little beast come out, they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Their worried hearts also relaxed. That should be the one with the sacred beast, right? If it released its aura, those ferocious beasts should all leave. Therefore, when the venerables and disciples got ready for battle and held their breaths to observe the movements of those ferocious beasts, they saw a round little beast appear out of nowhere and walk around those ferocious beasts as if there was no one around. Roar! Chapter 3141. The supremacies from the celestial sects were all dumbfounded by this scene. They found it hard to believe. The chubby little beast raised its head and puffed out its chest in an arrogant manner. It swung its tail and walked back. Some of the surrounding ferocious beasts let out a low roar and left. Some hesitated for a moment and wandered around before leaving. The supremacies and dozens of disciples were all dumbfounded. Someone asked, "Who does that little beast belong to?" Someone else asked, "What level is that little beast?" Someone else asked, "Why did all the ferocious beasts retreat? Were they scared off by that little beast?" However, no one could get an answer even though they were all confused. That was because that little beast had gone to some unknown place with a leap after circling around. Ahem! One of the supremacies coughed softly and said to the other supremacies, "Let's bring the seriously injured disciples back to their respective sects first. It's not suitable to stay here for long. Plus, there are some disciples here and some who have already left. Perhaps there aren't many disciples left here." Hearing this, the supremacies nodded. Then, they gathered the disciples of their respective sects and crushed their teleportation jade tokens to leave. As they left one after another, the number of people here gradually decreased. Fengzhou scanned the surroundings. His divine senses detected that there was no longer any life in the buried area. In other words, even if there were still people buried here, they would already be dead once they were rescued. You guys should leave quickly too. Your masters are very worried about you. They've also come in to look for you, but we don't know where they are. One of the supremacies said to Mu Ling and the others. His gaze paused on the inconspicuous young man behind them. He felt that this person was somewhat unfamiliar. Supremacies, will take our leave first then. Mu Ling and the others said and bowed to them with cupped hands. Thus, the remaining cerulean planet disciples were teleported out together with the injured ones. Mu Ling and the others also crushed their teleportation jade tokens and left after everyone else left. Fengzhou held the teleportation jade token in his hand and looked around. Seeing that the two supremacies from Cerulean Planet had no intention of leaving, he asked, "Are the two supremacies not leaving?" The two supremacies were talking and thinking about where to look to see if they had missed any disciples when they heard a voice behind them. They turned around and saw that it was this young man. They said, "We still need to look for a while more. You can leave first. The restriction here has loosened, and the divine beasts have come out from the depths. The danger in this secret realm has increased by more than one level. Even if the two venerables encountered a powerful divine beast, it would be difficult for them to escape unscathed." Fengzhou said and then paused to look at the two supremacies. "Supremacies, don't stay here too. And Dawn. And don't go. Supremacies." "Hee, we know. You can go now." The two of them laughed and let Fengzhou leave first. "Take care," Fengzhou said with cupped hands. Just as he was about to crush the teleportation jade token, he saw a loud bang in the sky some distance away. A distress signal sounded. Chapter 3142. Because everyone else had left and they were the only ones left, the two venerables immediately reacted and quickly rushed in that direction. Fengzhou stood on the spot and looked at the sky. There was another loud sound and two consecutive calls for help. It looked like the situation was critical. She lowered her head and looked at the teleportation jade token in her hand. Finally, she sighed helplessly and rushed in that direction. She was extremely fast and her body movements were exquisite. Her white figure shuttled through the forest like a ray of light. It was so fast that no one could see her figure. Because of this, the two venerables did not see that the figure that flashed by was Fengzhou, who had been standing beside them and talking to them. They also did not expect that the young man who had said that he wanted to leave would actually give up on leaving and rush to the place where the call for help had been sent. Fengzhou felt that she was still too soft-hearted and too fond of meddling in other people's business. It would have been one thing if she had not obtained the 1,000-year black spiritual tendons, but now that she had obtained it, she was delayed because of the calls for help. Although she had not been in this mystic realm for very long, she would still need some time to refine the pills. If she could return earlier, it would also be beneficial for the recovery of Shenyuan Mose's tendons and veins. However, she could not bear to leave him in the lurch. In the end, she was still too soft-hearted. Her speed was comparable to the speed of light and she left the two venerables far behind her. When she arrived at the place where the call for help had been sent, she saw two level 9 divine beasts attacking CK and Mu Xian. Mu Xian was sent flying by one of the level 9 divine beasts. His entire body flew out and crashed heavily into a large tree before bouncing off and falling to the ground. The force was so great that even the tree was broken. The thick and solid tree roots made a cracking sound as they fell to one side. Eft! Mu Xian spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. His chest was crushed by the fallen tree. His face was deathly pale. He wanted to push the tree away but found that he could not move the tree at all due to his severe internal injuries. Especially at this moment, the level 9 divine beast that had sent him flying opened its mouth wide and revealed its sharp teeth as it tried to bite his neck. At that moment, his heart jumped as the despair of death enveloped his entire being. He felt that he was so close to death. Mu Xian. CK suddenly turned around and saw this scene and cried out in heart-wrenching alarm. He wanted to rush forward to save him, but the level 9 divine beast that he had been fighting had clawed at his arm. Several deep claw marks that were so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood dripping down from his arm was a ghastly sight. His body was already covered in wounds. Mu Xian, get up, get up. He was a junior brother from the same immortal sect and had the same master. When he saw that Mu Xian was on the brink of death, he almost went crazy. He did not care about the injuries on his body and rushed forward. However, the figure that had rushed forward was blocked by the level 9 divine beast. The divine beast roared and a powerful pressure that contained a fierce aura came crashing towards him. He could only endure the pain of his injuries and quickly dodge. However, this dodge increased the distance between him and Mu Xian. Chapter 31-43. 2 9th-level divine beasts were able to make you so miserable. A clear and unhurried voice rang out, causing the hearts of the 2 despairing people to tremble. Honored Master! They looked towards the person who had arrived in surprise and excitement. However, just as Mu Xian looked towards the source of the voice, the tree that was pressing against her chest flew out and violently collided with the 9th-level divine beast that was pouncing towards her. Bang! Roar! The heavy blow from the tree struck the 9th-level divine beast with the force of a thunderbolt. A powerful hidden force passed through the tree and struck the 9th-level divine beast. The heavy impact caused the 9th-level divine beast to cry out in pain. At the same time, its body that had pounced forward was sent flying and landed heavily several meters away. Seeing this scene, CK and Mu Xian were stunned. They looked at her excitedly. Honored Master! They never thought that their honored master would appear to save them in their moment of despair. Even more unexpected was that their honored master, who was also at the heavenly god level, could send a 9th-level divine beast flying so easily. Fengjiu glanced at them and saw that they were both heavily injured. She said, CK, help Mu Xian to the side. Her gaze turned and landed on the 2 9th-level divine beasts. These 2 beasts have injured you. How about I let them be your mounts? With that clear and cold voice, she took a deep breath and charged towards one of the 9th-level divine beasts. When the 2 heard this, they could not help but be stunned. Let these 2 divine beasts be their mounts? Those were 9th-level divine beasts. They were only 1 level away from becoming powerful divine beasts. How could they be willing to be their mounts? However, in the next moment, they saw a scene that they would never forget. The 2 bloodthirsty and savage 9th-level divine beasts actually lay in front of their honored master and did not dare to move. No matter how she kicked and kicked them, they did not dare to retaliate. They just lay on the ground and curled up, their claws tightly hugging their heads as they howled in grief. Roar! Roar! The 2 mythological beasts howled, but their voices sounded like 2 puppies. They no longer had their previous awe-inspiring and imposing manner. Even if they used their claws to protect their heads, they still looked bruised and swollen. After Fengjiu taught the 2 divine beasts a lesson, he stopped and asked coldly, Do you want to die, or do you want to live? Of course I want to live. When the 2 level 9 divine beasts saw that she had stopped fighting, they hurriedly spoke up. They felt very sullen in their hearts. They had been the overlords of this mystic realm for many years, and were only 1 step away from becoming sacred beasts. But today, they had met such a lunatic, and the pressure on her body was actually that of an ancient sacred beast, causing them to involuntarily prostrate in front of her, not daring to fight back. However, when they recalled what she had said earlier, that she wanted them to be the mounts of those 2 humans, they said reluctantly, But we won't be the mounts of those 2 humans. Those 2 humans were so weak that they didn't want to be their mounts. Hearing this, Fengjiu raised her eyebrows. Is that so? But if you can leave this place alive, then the only way out is to be their mounts. If you're not willing, then I don't mind killing you right here and now. As she spoke, a flame condensed in her hand. The flame danced jubilantly in her palm, causing the two rank 9 divine beasts to tremble. Chapter 31:44. They couldn't help but tremble when they saw the flames. The ancient divine beast Fire Phoenix. So the coercion on her body was the coercion of the ancient divine beast Fire Phoenix. No wonder she was so powerful and terrifying. We're willing. Don't kill us, we're willing. The two level 9 divine beasts hurriedly said. A wise man submits to circumstances. Furthermore, this person was so powerful and had the ancient divine beast Fire Phoenix. Moreover, these two were her disciples, so following her was the right thing to do. Immediately, the two level 9 divine beasts quickly stepped forward and crouched down in front of CK and Mu Xian. Seeing this, Fengzhou glanced at the two divine beasts. At this moment, he saw that the two supremacies had also arrived. Before they even got close, the two supremacies had already cried out in alarm. Heavens! How did the two of you get injured so badly? They quickly stepped forward and looked at the two injured people. Then, they saw the two level 9 divine beasts crouching in front of them. Their expressions changed and they quickly retreated. Level 9 divine beasts. The two divine beasts glanced at the two supremacies and shifted their gazes to the two injured people. We're willing to establish a life contract with you. We'll protect you in life and death and will never betray you. When the two level 9 divine beasts spoke, CK and Mu Xian were stunned and couldn't react in time. Establishing a life contract with them? Wouldn't that mean that they'd really become their contracted beasts? These two level 9 divine beasts were unimaginably powerful. Were they really going to establish a life contract with them? Take them. Fengzhou glanced at the two supremacies. These two level 9 divine beasts have pretty good fighting abilities. CK and Mu Xian laughed bitterly. How could they not know that these two level 9 divine beasts had pretty good fighting abilities? However, it was precisely because of the strength of these two level 9 divine beasts that they were a little worried about whether they would cause any trouble after taking them in. With some hesitation, they looked at Fengzhou and said, Master, these two level 9 divine beasts are very powerful. It is precisely because they are very powerful that they are qualified to be your mounts. If it were not for their strength, they would not be qualified to be your mounts. As Fengzhou spoke, he glanced sideways at the two rank 9 divine beasts. Forget about the life contract, but you still want to establish a life contract after injuring you to this extent? Let's establish a master-servant contract, she said in a low voice, her cold gaze sweeping over the two mythological beasts who froze after hearing her words. When the two rank 9 divine beasts heard this, they didn't dare to utter a single word, because they clearly saw the killing intent that flashed through her eyes. They reckoned that if they really protested, this powerful human would really kill them. At this moment, the two venerable ones who had rushed over and retreated after seeing the two divine beasts were dumbfounded. Master? Their astonished and shocked gazes landed on the white-clothed youth at the side. Originally, they wanted to ask why this young man didn't leave and instead arrived here before them, but they didn't expect to hear such shocking words. Master? CK and Mu Xian's master? Weren't they Fengzhou and Shenyuan Mo's? Could it be that this young man in front of them? For a moment, the two of them stared at each other, speechless for a long time. Chapter 31:45. Fengzhou glanced at the two of them and said, What are you still standing there for? Contract with these two divine beasts and quickly leave this place to recuperate. Yes. CK and Mu Xian suppressed the excitement in their hearts. Although they were both seriously injured, they were still full of anticipation and excitement. 9th level divine beasts. They had never thought that they would be able to form a master-servant contract with a level 9 divine beast. Such a divine beast was too strong. It was only a step away from becoming a sacred beast. Even the patriarch of their sect did not have such a strong contracted beast. Moreover, with such a contracted beast, their strength, the families behind them, and their status would all rise again. Master had really given them a big gift. The two of them set up a master-servant contract with the two Class 9 divine beasts, and the two sovereigns who were standing there in a daze finally couldn't take it anymore. They looked at each other and came to Feng Zhou's side, smiling in a flattering manner. Sovereign, do you still lack disciples? The two of us are also lacking a master. Why don't you take us in? We will definitely be more respectful to you than senior brothers CK and Mu Xian. Feng Zhou raised her eyebrows and glanced at the two of them. I don't lack disciples. Venerable ones, please don't joke around. The two of them still wanted to say something, but they heard movement from CK and Mu Xian's side. They immediately looked over and saw the two of them exhale softly. It seemed that their injuries had healed a little after contracting with the two 9th-level divine beasts. CK and Mu Xian supported each other and stood up. They looked at Feng Zhou and knelt down to her. Thank you for saving us, Master. Thank you for gifting us these divine beasts. She had saved their lives and given them these divine beasts. They would never forget her kindness. The two of them glanced at the two venerables. Although they had just contracted with the divine beasts, they had heard their conversation. They did not expect them to be so thick-skinned as to recommend themselves as their master's disciples. Did they really think that their master would accept just anyone? It had to be said that they were dissatisfied in their hearts. They felt like they had been poached. Noticing CK and Mu Xian's glances, the two venerables coughed awkwardly and said, Well, since there's nothing else, you can leave first. Let's go see if there are any other disciples nearby. No need. CK looked at them and said, Earlier, we found many disciples and asked them to leave. There shouldn't be any disciples of the Blue Star Immortal sect here. Moreover, there are powerful, ferocious beasts everywhere. It's not suitable to stay here for long. Two supremacies, please leave with us. Hearing this, the two of them looked at each other, then looked at Feng Zhou. Only then did they nod their heads. All right. After they went out, they counted the disciples to see if everyone was present. Therefore, after they cupped their hands in salute, they crushed their teleportation jade tokens and left this place. Seeing that the two of them had left, CK and Mu Xian looked at Feng Zhou. Seeing this, Feng Zhou crushed his teleportation jade token as well. With a flash of light, he disappeared from this mystic realm. Seeing this, CK and Mu Xian put away their two contracted beasts, then quickly crushed their teleportation jade tokens and left. Chapter 31:46. The three people's hearts sank when they heard the same words. Lin Chungjin frowned. She didn't come out? They had found the elixir, why hadn't she come out? Mu Ling and Pei Zixuan looked at each other and said, Maybe she was delayed by something inside. With her cultivation, we don't have to worry about her. That was true, but the people who were supposed to come out together did not come out. Even though they knew that she was very powerful, they couldn't help but worry. What was she doing inside? What was she delayed by? However, just as they were thinking, they heard a cry of surprise. Supremacy CK. Supremacy Mu Xian. Why are you so badly injured? Hearing the cry of the supremacy not far away, they were stunned and quickly turned to look. They saw that the two people who appeared in the transportation array not far away were their masters. At this moment, their bodies were covered in blood and wounds, and they were trembling with fear. Masters! The three of them exclaimed and quickly ran over. As they rushed forward, they saw the young man in white, Feng Zhou, who had been pushed to the side. Seeing that she had come out safely, their worried hearts finally relaxed. It was good that she was fine. It was good that she had come out. This way, they would have something to say to their masters. As their masters were seriously injured, they couldn't care less about Feng Zhou and went forward to help support them. Masters, how did you get so badly injured? Quick, help them back. Even though they were also injured, seeing their masters in such a state, they couldn't care less about their injuries and quickly helped their masters back to the peak. Seeing this, Feng Zhou also went forward to help them back. In the corner, the two supremacies who knew the situation couldn't help but sigh as they watched them leave. What a pity! What a pity! Why couldn't they have such a person as their master? They also wanted such a master. For the first time, they actually envied others for having such a master. For the first time, They regretted that they didn't go up to the competition stage. Fengjiu, who had followed them back to the peak, told them to go to the main peak of CK first. She would treat their injuries. Thus, Pei Zixuan, Mu Ling, and Lin Chungjin sent the two of them to the courtyard of the main peak. Su Kaiji and the others, who had heard the news of their return, also came here. However, Mu Ling and the others were guarding the courtyard, so they were not allowed to enter. Seeing the injuries on their bodies, Fei Kaiji couldn't help but ask, "How did you guys get injured like this?" The three of them looked at their own bodies and smiled. It's just some minor injuries. They had been training with Fengjiu for a few days, and it was already considered good that they had made it out alive. Who knew what they had experienced in those few days? Senior martial brothers, go back and wash up first. Bandage your wounds. We'll just stand guard here. Gretchen stepped forward and said, "No need." The three of them shook their heads at the same time. "We'll go back later. Our masters are seriously injured. If we don't take a look at them, we won't feel at ease." They didn't say anything else when they saw this, and they just waited there until the door to the courtyard was opened, and Fengjiu walked out. "How are our masters?" They surrounded her and asked. Fengjiu glanced at them and said, "Their lives are not in danger. Don't worry. Let them recuperate in this courtyard for now. Don't go back to the cave abode first." Chapter 31:47. When they saw her walking out, Mu Ling and the others couldn't help but ask, "Are you leaving?" Fengjiu stopped in her tracks and glanced back at them. "I'm going to my abode to refine pills. I'll leave after I'm done." As she spoke, she strode out. "Let's go in and see our masters." As they spoke, they went in to see their masters. After they saw their masters, only two of them stayed behind to take care of them while the other disciples left first. As they emerged from the secret realm, the exalted ones started to do a head count to see if anyone was missing. The four sects had fallen into chaos because of the loosening of the restrictions in the secret realm. They were busy reorganizing the restrictions in the secret realm and investigating the loosening of the restrictions. On the other side, after Fengjiu returned to the abode that CK and Mu Xian had prepared for her and Moze, she started to prepare the herbs she needed to refine pills. After many years of collection and cultivation, she had all the spirit energy in her space. Now, she only had to gather the spirit herbs she needed to refine pills. After she set up a barrier and a formation outside the abode, she flashed into the space. As soon as she entered the space, Senior White pulled a long face and looked at her with hidden bitterness. When she saw this, she couldn't help but laugh and ask, "What's wrong?" "Master, you're biased." Senior White spoke faintly and seemed listless. He glanced at Tun Yun, and then his resentful gaze flashed past the mother beast before he said to Fengjiu, "You found a partner for Tun Yun, but you didn't find one for me. I'm sad." It lay on the ground listlessly as if it didn't even have the strength to move. When she heard this, Fengjiu chuckled. "So that's what you're talking about." She glanced at the mother beast that lay by Tun Yun's side and smiled at Senior White. "I thought you didn't want to hang yourself on a tree, but since you have such thoughts, I'll find one for you if I have the chance in the future. However, at that time, even if you meet one that you like in the future, you can only look on helplessly." When Senior White heard this, he couldn't help but think for a moment, then forget it. Who knew if it would find another mother beast beautiful in the future after its master found it a partner? Fengjiu smiled when he heard that. He crouched down in front of Tun Yun and patted its head gently. He said softly, "Let me tell you, I didn't help Tun Yun get this companion. It was Tun Yun who attracted it. If you can be like Tun Yun, you might attract more than one mother beast in the future. Don't you think so?" Senior White's eyes lit up, and he instantly recovered his vigor. He stood up from the ground, swung his tail, and raised his head. "That's right. I, Senior White, am handsome and extraordinary. I'm one of a kind in the world. How could an ordinary beast compare to my charm and vigor?" When Tun Yun heard this and saw Lao Bai's arrogant look, he could not help but curl his lips. Seeing this, the mother beast leaned forward and whispered, "It's not as mighty as you, nor is it as handsome as you." When Tun Yun heard this, He smacked his lips and glanced at the mother beast. He was actually unable to say a word. When Fingzhou heard this, she also chuckled. She glanced at the mother beast and continued, "All right, I still have important matters to attend to. You guys can stay here by yourselves." Chapter 3148. Fengzhou was refining pills in the space, while Shenyuan Mose was waiting for her return in Four Corner City. On the other side, in the main peak of the Carefree sect, in the bamboo forest, in the bamboo house, Wanyan Chenhua was lying on the bed with a pale face. Her breathing was steady, but she had not woken up. In the bamboo house, 2 female disciples were standing guard. When they saw the white figure walking in from outside, the 2 female disciples hurriedly stepped forward and bowed, saying softly, "Disciples greet the sect master." The man had one hand in front of his abdomen and the other behind his back. He was wearing a white robe, and his face was as handsome as an immortal's. However, his aura was as cold as ice. Even though he had a godlike appearance, the 2 female disciples lowered their heads in awe, not daring to look at him. As he walked in, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He did not speak, but waved his hand, and the 2 female disciples left. He walked forward. His pace was neither fast nor slow, and was very calm. He came to the bedside and looked at the woman lying on the bed. After a long time, he sat down by the bed and reached out his hand to feel her pulse. "Why don't you go back?" A clear voice sounded. It was different from the low and magnetic voice of an ordinary man. It was a unique, clear voice, as if there were no emotions, no ups and downs. However, when he suddenly said these words, it sounded very strange. The bamboo house was very quiet, as if the voice just now was just an illusion. Hearing no response, the carefree swordmaster, Jun Juishang, coldly turned his head and looked at the soft bed in the bamboo house. He frowned and said, "Didn't you hear me talking to you?" Wanyan Chenhua's soul, who was lying on the soft bed, was startled. She looked at the man in white who was coldly staring at her. No, staring at her soul. She was slightly surprised and asked, "You can see me?" In fact, she had just woken up today, but she did not expect her soul to leave her body when she woke up. Moreover, she could not return to her body. Her body had not recovered from the serious injuries. Although her soul had left her body, she was still breathing. She now felt that she had become light as a feather, as if a gust of wind could blow her away. Therefore, she was lying on the soft bed, depressed. Who would have thought that Sword Master Xiaoyao could see her? One had to know that the 2 female disciples who served here had been here for the entire morning and had not seen her lying here. It was all thanks to the 2 female disciples. Although she was still unconscious, her soul was able to listen to the idle chatter of the 2 female disciples in the morning. Therefore, she knew that this was the Carefree sect and that she was saved by this man, the Carefree Swordmaster. Her body could not return to her body, and her soul power was weak. She did not dare to go out for fear that she would be blown away by the wind. Therefore, she could only lie here. Seeing that the Carefree Swordmaster was coldly staring at her, she could not help but turn over and lie on her side. She supported her head with one hand and played with her hair with the other. Her beautiful face revealed a seductive smile. "Carefree Swordmaster, it's not that I don't want to go back, it's that I can't go back." Even if she was a soul, she was only wearing her undergarments. At this moment, as she lay down on her side, the front of her clothes was slightly open, revealing a hint of spring. Chapter 3149. However, the godlike man's expression was the same as before. He didn't even blink, as if he couldn't see the alluring spring scenery. He calmly looked at her for a while, then retracted his gaze and looked at the woman lying on the bed. 2 identical faces. One was a human and the other was a soul, but they were split from the same person. But why couldn't her soul return to her body? So he reached out his hand and checked her pulse carefully. At this time, Wanyan Chenhua, who found it interesting, moved her eyes slightly. Her body floated, and she lightly floated to Xiaoyao Jun's side and sat down. Her body seemed to be boneless as she stretched out her hand and placed it on his shoulder. Her entire body softly leaned on him. "Eh? I can actually touch you?" She thought that she would pass through him, but she didn't expect to touch him. This made her feel a little strange. She didn't have a physical body now, only a soul. Logically speaking, she shouldn't be able to touch anyone, but she didn't expect to touch him. This person, what's so special about him? She couldn't help but turn her head slightly to size him up. However, she was half leaning on Jun Jushang's body. She was gently pushed away by him. Her entire body flew up and landed on the soft couch. Jun Jushang's unique and cold voice was heard before she could open her mouth. "A restless ghost." Wanyan Chenhua heard this and laughed softly. "Who said I'm a ghost? I'm just a soul." As she said this, she glanced at him and asked, "Xiaoyao Jun, why can't I return to my body? You're from the Wanyan clan." He stood up and turned around. He walked to the soft bed with his hands behind his back and stopped in front of Wanyan Chenhua. Under the situation where she didn't introduce herself, he actually saw through her with a glance. Wanyan Chenhua's eyes flashed and she smiled charmingly. "Xiaoyao Jun is really smart. You actually guessed it right." As she said this, she stood up from the soft bed and stood in front of him with a lazy and weak look. But she still bowed to him solemnly. "Wanyan Chenhua thanks Xiaoyao Jun for saving my life." She knew that if he didn't save her, she probably wouldn't be alive now. Well, although he seemed to be half dead now, there was nothing he could do about it. Jun Jushang looked at her. His eyes were calm and emotionless. His expression was cold and indifferent. It was unknown what he was thinking about. After a long while, he turned around and walked out without saying a word. Seeing this, Wanyan Chenhua hurriedly followed. Her light body swayed and arrived beside him. Because she was worried that she would be blown away by the wind due to her unstable soul power, she reached out and pulled on his sleeve. Jun Jushang, who was about to leave, paused. He turned his head and glanced at the transparent hand on his sleeve. Then he slowly looked up. His gaze fell on Wanyan Chenhua's face. "Let go." Her voice was flat and emotionless. "I'm bored staying here, so I'll follow you outside to take a look. If I don't pull on your sleeve, I'm afraid I'll be blown away by the wind due to my unstable soul power." As she spoke, her beautiful eyes looked at him with a smile, as if she didn't see his cold face. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, others can't see me." However, Jun Jushang didn't give her a chance to pull on his sleeve. He waved his sleeve and sent Wanyan Chenhua back to the bamboo house. Then he walked away. Chapter 3150. Her soul power was unstable, so she gathered her thoughts and sat cross-legged on the soft couch to cultivate. She faintly felt that her soul couldn't return to her body after being seriously injured. Perhaps it had something to do with her cultivation method, or perhaps it was because her soul was unstable so she couldn't return to her body. If she wanted to return to her body and wake up, she could only cultivate and stabilize her soul. She had just closed her eyes to cultivate when she was stunned for a moment. She opened her eyes and muttered, "I forgot to tell him just now. Tell him to send a message to her master that she's fine." After thinking about it, she shook her head. "Forget it. Let's stabilize my soul first." She then closed her eyes and continued to cultivate. The next day, after a day and night of cultivation, Wanyan Chenhua felt that her soul was gradually stabilizing. It wouldn't be blown away by a gust of wind. She then walked out of her bamboo house and into the bamboo forest. Because her soul had left her body, she was currently barefoot and wearing an inner garment with her black hair draped over her shoulders. However, her appearance was outstanding and her actions revealed a seductive elegance. Therefore, her appearance with her black hair draped over her shoulders and her bare feet in an inner garment was pleasing to the eye. In fact, there was even a trace of seductive aura that could hook one's soul. She felt the fresh air in the bamboo forest and the sunlight above her head. She squinted her eyes. Fortunately, she wasn't a ghost. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to withstand the sunlight. Although her soul had left her body wasn't far from it. Furthermore, She was a member of the Wanyan clan and had been in contact with ghosts for a long time. Even if she was a soul, it was different from the souls of ordinary ghosts. She tiptoed and wandered around the bamboo forest. After familiarizing herself with the place, she floated out of the bamboo forest. She wandered around the free and unfettered sect, listening to the conversations of the disciples and watching them cultivate. Finally, she came to a place where she felt that the spiritual aura was extremely abundant. She then found a place to cultivate. Once she started cultivating, she forgot about the time. She didn't go back even when the sky darkened. Jun Jushang walked into the bamboo house in his white clothes. He swept his gaze around, but didn't see Wanyan Qianhua's soul, so he frowned. He walked to the couch and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and rested, waiting for Wanyan Qianhua to return. He waited for an entire night, but she still hadn't returned. The next morning, Wanyan Qianhua returned to the bamboo house in high spirits. He saw Jun Jushang sitting by the bed as soon as he entered. He had placed something on the bedside. "What are you doing?" She floated in, her charming eyes looking at him with surprise. Jun Jushang glanced at her indifferently and said, "Come here. I will help you return your soul to your body." Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua floated over. "You have an idea? Lie down," Jun Jushang said calmly. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua covered her mouth and chuckled. "Free and unfettered lord, telling a girl to lie down like this. Isn't it not very good?" However, as soon as she finished speaking, she saw him reach out with his hand. Her entire soul flew up and lay down on her body. "Hey!" A slender white finger suddenly pressed against her chest. A warm breath was transmitted into her body through his palm. She could clearly feel it. Chapter 31:51. She glared at him with her beautiful eyes. But who would have thought that Jun Jushang would remain expressionless? His eyes were calm and his breath was cold. It was as if he was touching the floor when he touched her soft chest, making her angry. She felt her soul and body gradually returning to one. She opened her eyes and looked at the man sitting by the bed. "Xiaoyao Jun, is it soft?" Jun Jushang's calm gaze fell on her face. He saw that her face was filled with a charming smile, but her eyes were almost spitting fire. His gaze moved down and fell on the place where his hand was touching, the towering and soft place. His eyes flashed and his cold voice faintly sounded. "If your heart is not right, your thoughts will be evil. This June cultivates the emotionless sword Tao. My heart has no 7 emotions and 6 desires. Everything is an illusion." What he meant was that his heart was righteous and he had no evil thoughts. In addition, he cultivated the emotionless sword Tao and had no emotions or desires in his heart. Therefore, even if he placed his hand on her chest, it would be like an illusion to him. It was nothing, there was nothing. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua almost couldn't suppress the anger in her eyes. Did that mean that she had been taken advantage of and treated as if she was invisible? Because of her anger, her chest rose and fell violently. The hand on her chest also rose and fell with her heavy breathing, but it didn't move away. Looking at the serious appearance of the person in front of her, and staring at the hand on her chest, she wanted to get up, but found that she couldn't. She took a deep breath and asked, "Why can't I get up?" This June used the soul-suppressing stone to suppress your soul. Before your soul and body are completely stabilized, the soul-suppressing stone can't be moved, and you can't get up. While speaking, he turned his hand, and after a breath entered her body, he withdrew his hand and looked at her without changing his expression. "You can just lie here. This June will come over in the evening to remove the soul-suppressing stone for you." With that, he stood up, flicked his sleeves, and turned to leave, leaving Wanyan Qianhua lying on the bed, unable to move. She could only stare blankly. Although she was angry, it was undeniable that her soul and body were in a state. Since she couldn't get up, then she would just sleep. There was still a long way to go. When she recovered, she would deal with him. Everything was an illusion? What a good everything is an illusion. She wanted to see if it was really like what he said. In the evening, Wanyan Qianhua, who was sleeping soundly, felt that someone had come in. Her vigilance made her instantly open her eyes. She saw that Jun Jushang was standing in front of the bed, taking back the soul-suppressing stone. Just as he put away the soul-suppressing stone, she leaped to her feet. She felt as though she had recovered. That feeling of solidity made her feel at ease. "Let's leave tomorrow since you've recovered," Jun Jushang said. He didn't even look at Wanyan Qianhua. Then, he turned around and walked outside. Seeing this, Wanyan Qianhua only smiled and didn't say anything. She just quietly watched him leave. After he left, she got out of bed and stretched her body. She took out a red robe from her space and put it on. Then, she took out a hairpin and simply coiled up her hair. After looking her up and down, she revealed a satisfied smile. Chapter 31:52. Hearing their anxious and worried voices, she couldn't help but purse her lips into a smile. Her heart felt warm. After replying to each of them and telling them that she was safe, she looked at the sky outside. Seeing that it was pitch black, she walked out. On the other side of the bamboo forest, there was another bamboo house. Not far behind the bamboo house, there was a hot spring. She walked there and planned to take a bath. However, when she got closer, she saw that there was a light in the bamboo house. When she floated here that day, there was no one here. However, according to the disciples, this bamboo house was Jun Wu Jushang's residence. She pushed the door open and entered. She looked around and didn't see anyone, so she turned around and walked towards the hot spring. However, as soon as she got close to the hot spring, she became happy. A teasing smile appeared on her charming and seductive face. "Oh, I was wondering who it was. Isn't this Xiao Yao Jun?" She covered her mouth and smiled. Step by step, she walked towards the hot spring. Looking at the man sitting in the hot spring, her eyes were full of ridicule. Jun Jushang originally had his eyes closed. When he heard her voice, he slightly frowned and opened his eyes. He coldly looked at her. "What are you doing here? Isn't it obvious? I'm also here to take a bath." As she spoke, she squatted down beside the hot spring and looked at the clothed man in the hot spring. "But Xiao Yao Jun, why aren't you taking off your clothes?" Jun Jushang closed his eyes and lightly said, "Go back to your bamboo house and ask someone to send water over." Ha ha ha. She smiled and played with the water. Her eyes had an inexplicable light. "But I prefer to take a bath here. Since Xiao Yao Jun cultivates the emotionless sword Dao, he doesn't have the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Everything is just an illusion. Why don't I come down and accompany Xiao Yao Jun?" As she spoke, she slowly stood up. Her fingers brushed against her belt. She gently pulled it and released it. She took off her red outer clothes and casually put it aside. Then, she continued to take off her inner clothes. Hearing the sound of clothes being taken off, Jun Jushang's eyebrows wrinkled tightly, as if they could squeeze 2 flies to death. He opened his eyes to take a look, only to see the woman sitting on a rock beside the hot spring. She had taken off all her clothes except for a red doo-doo and a pair of extremely short underwear. Her white jade-like skin glowed under the dim light of the night. She placed her hands on both sides of her body and leaned back. Her slender and smooth legs were stretched out in the hot spring water as she frolicked. Her ink-black hair was draped over her shoulders and her face was bewitching. She was like a fairy under the night sky, so beautiful that it could move one's soul. "Xiao Yao Jun, am I beautiful?" Wanyan Qianhua seemed to be doing it on purpose. She used the tip of her foot to kick the water towards Jun Jushang, who was leaning against the wall. Her charming laughter was as moving as a silver bell. "You are a woman." An indifferent and cold voice rang out. That simple sentence, as well as the calm expression on his face and the frown on his brows, all showed that he did not approve of her, a woman, doing such a thing. "Ah, so Xiao Yao Jun knows that I am a woman?" Wanyan Qianhua's face was full of surprise. "I thought Xiao Yao Jun thought that I was a man." Hearing this, Jun Jushang did not say anything. He only looked at her quietly. Even in the face of such a stunning beauty, He did not have any thoughts that he should not have. Until he saw the woman sliding into the hot spring and bathing in the same pool as him, his gaze slightly moved. Chapter 31:53. Hearing this, Wanyan Shenhua was shocked. What? Xiao Yao Jun didn't want to take responsibility for me? As she spoke, she suddenly covered her face and wept softly. You've touched me and looked at me, and now you're saying such things? You want me to marry someone? Who do you want me to marry? Seeing this woman's face change, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of person she was. A moment ago, she was seductive and charming, but the next moment, she covered her face and wept. Her snow-white shoulders trembled slightly as she wept, making it hard to see what kind of person she was. In the next moment, he got up from the hot spring and was about to leave. However, when he stood up, the woman who was covering her face and weeping suddenly threw herself at him and hugged his leg. Xiao Yao Jun, you have to take responsibility for me. Hearing the woman's voice, when the woman's soft body pressed against his leg, he almost didn't think about it and flicked his sleeve to push her away. With Wanyan Shenhua's strength, how could she withstand his strength? At that moment, she cried out in surprise and flew out, falling into the hot spring. After struggling for a while, she sank. Jun Jushang was about to leave, but he saw that there was no movement in the hot spring. He turned around and saw that the woman was lying motionless in the water, as if she had fainted. Seeing this, he walked into the hot spring again and pulled her out of the water. However, when he pulled her out, the woman who was originally motionless reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. Like an octopus, she clung to him tightly without caring about her image. I knew that Xiao Yao Jun wouldn't want me to be drowned to death. Wanyan Shenhua's voice carried a hint of laughter, with a hint of pride. She wrapped her arms tightly around his neck. Just as he was about to throw her onto the bed, she wrapped her long legs around his waist. She looked at him face to face, taking in all of his suppressed anger in her eyes. Oh, Xiao Yao Jun, are you angry? Wanyan Shenhua cried out in surprise, as if she had discovered a new continent. Compared to his suppressed anger, her eyes were full of smiles, and her face was full of joy. Jun Jushang tried to throw her down, but who knew that she would hug him tighter and tighter. Her whole body was tightly pressed against him, and her two legs were tightly wrapped around his waist. This made Jun Jushang, who had never been so close to a woman, blue veins appear on his forehead, and his body became tense because of her friction. Let go! The voice came out of his mouth, and he stared coldly at the woman. He couldn't understand. Why was this woman not afraid of him? How dare she be so impudent? Not Wanyan Shenhua. She looked at the angry man. She felt very accomplished. She felt that she had provoked the anger to provoke the anger to, who was to. Especially, this was an old antique. Let go. Not let. There was a strong contrast between their anger and their charming smiles. This scene looked very comical, but it was also very pleasing to the eye. After all, the two of them were extremely beautiful. Moreover, they were in the hot spring. Whether it was Jun Jushang or Wanyan Shenhua, their clothes were wet and clinging tightly to their bodies. Moreover, they were in such an intimate position. It was naturally very pleasing to the eye. Sect Master. A man came to the front of the bamboo house to look for Jun Jushang, but after seeing that there was no one, and hearing the sound from the hot spring behind, he walked towards the hot spring. Sect. Chapter 31:54. The man who had just circled to the back of the bamboo house only felt the cold and suppressed anger in the voice suddenly shout, and a powerful force swept him away. He couldn't react in time and fell to the ground. His heart was filled with fear, and he scrambled away. He didn't know what had happened. He didn't even see the figure of the person in the hot spring before he was shouted out by that powerful aura. He had followed the sect master for many years, but this was the first time he had seen him so angry. Wanyan Shenhua, who had caused all this, was slightly startled. She blinked her beautiful eyes and looked at Jun Jushang, who was finally not expressionless anymore. She felt strange in her heart. Why is he so angry? Even if that person broke in, she should be the one who was anxious. Jun Ju-shang stared at the woman hanging on his body. His tense face darkened. How long do you plan to hang on me? Don't you know what you look like now? His cold voice shouted. He looked at the woman in front of him who was hanging on his body like an octopus. Her red undergarment couldn't cover her body. Her two jade arms were tightly wrapped around his body. The veins on his forehead were throbbing. This woman, does she have any sense of shame? What do I look like now? Wanyan Chenhua asked with a smile. She looked at him and said, Xiao Yao Jun, what do you want? You haven't told me how you want to take responsibility. Come down and talk. He tried to pull down the woman who was hanging on his body, but the touch was slippery. He couldn't help but let go of his hand. Seeing his reaction, Wanyan Chenhua looked at him playfully and asked with a smile, Is it slippery? Hearing this, Jun Ju-shang's face darkened. He didn't know what to say to this woman. This woman's way of thinking was different from normal people. Xiao Yao Jun, since you saved me, why don't we do this? I'll give my body to you. How about it? She looked at him with her beautiful eyes and suggested. Jun Ju-shang was too lazy to talk to her. He couldn't pull her down, so he stepped out of the hot spring and walked towards the bamboo house step by step. However, with such a woman hanging on his body, it was strange no matter how one looked at it. In particular, the man who had been yelled at to get lost was watching from afar in the bamboo forest. However, the night was pitch black and the light was dim, so he could not see clearly what was going on. All he knew was that there seemed to be a disheveled woman hanging on their order master's body. No, I must be wrong. He rubbed his eyes and was about to walk closer to take a closer look when he heard the sect master's cold voice. Do you want to face the wall at Sword Peak? And Wanyan Chenhua looked at the red robe that he had pulled back from the hot spring with one hand and helped her put it on. Her eyes flashed slightly, and a smile overflowed from her lips. Only then did she get off his body and put on the robe. Leave at dawn tomorrow. He didn't look at her again. Instead, he said this to her. Wanyan Chenhua smiled and said, As the saying goes, it's easier to invite the devil in than to send him away. You saved me and now you want me to leave? It won't be that easy. She smiled and walked back to the hot spring to take a bath. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.